I have a spoiler-free book review for you. I am going to be talking about The Prison Healer. This is a book by Lynette Noni, and it comes out on the 13th of April. So this book will be available for you to purchase tomorrow. And I highly recommend that you go and pick it up because I absolutely loved this book. I got an early copy from NetGalley and I just flew through this. This is a YA fantasy that is once again in typical Jessie fashion, one that is kind of lighter on the magic and heavier on the politics and relationships. There is quite a bit of really cool magic in it, but that doesn't really take place until much later in the book. In the beginning of this book, you're just following like characters with no magic. There's nothing. There's talks of magic, but it's not like really a big part of the series until you get closer to the end. So if you need something that is like super magical and has a lot of magic in it, this might not be for you. But y'all, I absolutely adored this book. I flew through it. The writing was beautiful. The story was really fun. I liked the romance. Like, it was just everything that I like in a book with a couple little things that kind of bothered me, which brought it down to a 4.5 instead of a 5-star. But again, highly recommend this book. In this story, we are following 17-year-old Kiva. Kiva is a prisoner. She has been in this prison called Zolendov for 10 years now, which is absolutely insane because this is like a hard labor camp type prison. And when most people go in there, they only survive a year, maybe 2, depending on what job they are assigned. Well, Kiva is an especially skilled healer, so she is assigned to work in the infirmary, which is why she's managed to live as long as she has. She is kind of under the warden's protection, and because of that, a lot of the other prisoners look down on her. Like, they're very hateful towards her. So she doesn't have like a group of friends. Her whole thing is like, don't make friends, don't make acquaintances, like, just do you and stick to yourself, stay in your lane, and don't make waves. And that's kind of how she has managed to survive. She does have one like kind of close friend, and that is this boy named Tip, and he actually is absolutely adorable. He is a young character, and he has a stutter, and she just kind of like protects him like a very sisterly figure. And I absolutely love their relationship in this book. And so Kiva basically just keep her head down. She don't make friends. She don't make waves. She just does what she has to do to stay alive. And then one day we have this new prisoner come in. And so she, as the healer, does prison intake. If they are dead, then they send them to the morgue because not everybody that arrives to this prison arrives alive. And one out of these 3 people that just came in is alive, and she has to kind of clean them up and then carve a Z into like the back of their hand because that kind of marks them as the prisoner. Well, this prisoner kind of takes a liking to her. He's like this really strange, like mysterious character that just comes into her life and is like, hey, we're gonna be friends. And she's like, no, we're not. And it's just super cool. And a couple days after this, where she's still kind of adjusting to the fact that this person, for some reason, wants to be friends with her, the rebel queen that this kingdom has been fighting against for these years and years arrives at the prison in terrible condition. Like, on her deathbed, blind, and just super sick. And it is up to Kiva to keep this rebel queen alive because a lot of different factions want her to survive. There's the rebels inside the prison who hate Kiva, and then there's also rebels outside the prison, which Kiva believes that her family is coming to save her, and she gets these like little notes, and this little note that was snuck in with the queen said, "We are coming, keep her alive." And Kiva has to do that. She's like, okay, I'm gonna keep her alive, but how? When she's mortally wounded and just on her deathbed. But she also is sentenced to these trials. And it's these 4 elemental trials. And it's not something that happens very, very often. But if the person who is sentenced to the trials survives all 4, then they win their freedom. And obviously this rebel queen is not going to be able to like even get to the first trial. So Kiva volunteers as her champion, and now she has to undergo these trials, try to survive and try to keep the queen alive, and just all of these other things that are going on in the background. There's also like the guards that are super, super awful. And then we've got just like prisoners that absolutely hate her. We've got the warden, and it's just so much. So this book was so much fun. And while it wasn't perfect, I really enjoyed my time reading it. And I'm actually super excited for book 2 to come out, which comes out in October of this year as well. So book 1 releases tomorrow, and then book 2 releases in October. So that's pretty close to back. Like, I've never really seen a first and second book release that quickly in succession. Book 3 does not have a release date or anything yet, but it is on Goodreads. So I have a feeling it'll probably come out at the beginning of next year. So I don't know if it's a trilogy. There's only 3 listed on Goodreads, or if it's going to be longer, but I think this is really cool that the series is coming out super close together. Like I said, this book is perfect for people who like a more political fantasy. There is definitely a lot of inner politics, the politics of the world, and then the politics of the prison itself, and just the inner workings of the prisoners and the guards, and kind of slowly learning the magic, but having that on the back burner to like the politics in the world. We also kind of have this like mystery going on, because there's this like sickness that is going through the prison that is killing people, and Kiva's not only trying to like survive these trials, keep the queen alive, she's also trying to keep all of these prisoners alive, figure out what this sickness is, but the problem is all the prisoners hate her. So it's just so wild. Like, one thing that I didn't really love so much about this book was how fast I felt like the romance moved. I felt like we went from just meeting to in love a little quicker than I would have liked that relationship. While I liked the relationship itself, it developed super quickly. And it's funny though, because what I do like about it is that it is not the girl that is like in insta love with the guy. It is actually the other way around. It is the guy that kind of initiates everything and is kind of in insta love with the girl. And while insta-lovey isn't like my absolute favorite, I really kind of liked the way it worked in this, because she's kind of prickly. She's kind of like, no, I don't want friends. I don't want nobody. And our guy, Jaren, is just this like sweet cinnamon roll of a character. And this whole time, like, she's like, well, he's gonna die because he's sentenced to hard labor. And he like keeps surviving. And she's like, why do you keep talking to me? Why do you keep coming to see me? And I just love their dynamic, even if I did think that it moved a little too quickly. There's also a whole lot of like little reveals and surprises, and a couple of them were a little predictable. And one of them in particular was a holy shit moment at the very end of the book, and I loved that. And while the one I kind of guessed pretty early on, it still was really cool the way it was done, the way it was described, and I really liked how that worked. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but I really like the little twists and turns and reveals that we get to learn throughout this book. But just when you think you know what's going on and you know everything, this author just chucks one in right at the end and is like, oh, by the way, and you're like, what? This is why I'm happy that book 2 is coming out in October, because after the ending and having this like big reveal thrown in like right at the very end, I'm like, but what now? Like what? So that was really, really cool. I like books that leave me guessing. I like to try to pick things out and guess things. And this book really did it for me. And there were so many just like little moments that I absolutely loved. And I'm just excited to get to the next book. I think this is one that definitely leans older YA, but more, you know, on a scale of like Fireborn and the Gilded Ones to like, you know, your Twilight YA. This is somewhere in the middle of those. Like, it's not quite like younger, angsty YA with a lot of romance, but it's also not what I would consider almost adult. It's more in that middle area where it's like there's a lot of darker themes, there's a lot of things that are implied, and there's a couple scenes that are pretty difficult and gory, but nothing to the extent of like an adult grimdark or anything like that. So keep that kind of in mind. There are some trigger warnings for self-harm and drug abuse, as well as like, you know, your typical like death and gore, violence, torture, and sexual assault. Those are all kind of your trigger warnings. Those are included in this story, both mentioned and on page. So if any of those bother you, I highly recommend kind of making sure you know what you're getting into when reading this book. But all in all, I absolutely loved this. I think it was a fun story, and I just loved all the twists and turns. I loved where the story went. I think it kind of subverted some of my expectations, but it still kind of felt very familiar. And like, if you just want to pick up a really good YA fantasy book that you know you're gonna just dive in and enjoy, this is really, really fun. And I recommend it. So go ahead, pick it up. The first book, like I said, it comes out tomorrow, which is the 13th of April. And then book 2 is going to be coming out in October. So that's super exciting because we don't have to wait that long to read the next book of a new release. So I wish more publishers would do this, or however it is, because I need book 2, y'all. Hopefully you enjoyed me kind of bumbling about and talking about this book in as non-spoilery a fashion as possible. I had a good time. I really enjoyed it. Again, thank you, NetGalley, for giving me this arc, and hopefully you'll give me the arc of book 2 because I really want it. All right, my name is Jessie. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I will see you next time. Bye.